So back again, short show, short show. Just got to tackle a couple questions. I know it's late as well, but I want to take care of this stuff. I wanted to get this stuff out of the way. I know some of you guys were asking questions and I couldn't get to it before and didn't want to let this linger on till the next show later this week. So, let's see here. Just putting it on. And it's late. I don't expect a ton of you guys to show up on this one live, but it's all good. We do have some of you guys on here. It's good to see you. All right. So here's the situation. We got the wine. We got to start with the wine real quick, just a little bit. It's late. I want to go to bed after this, but we have two Southern Rhone whites from the same producer, same year. So good contrast between the two. This one won a medal competition in France. So it's standard Côte de Rhone Blanc and Carène. Now I got to say, Carène is not a wine that I would usually see in white. In fact, I mean, I'm sure you can get it in France, relatively common, but Carène is one of those appellations in general, which are not usually even mentioned. It's getting a little bit more popular. So you have in southern France, in the Rhone Valley, be more specific, in the southern Rhone, you have, you know, the grand standard of Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and then you had Gigondas, which followed a bit thereafter. And Châteauneuf has the main cachet. Gigondas was kind of considered to be the second runner, you know, poor man's Châteauneuf. But over time, Gigondas began to get towards the price point of Châteauneuf, not quite the same level, but quite expensive. You were starting to get Gigondas would never be under $20, would often be 30, 40, even $50. Of course, Châteauneuf is around 30, can be up to 100 or 80 or something like that. So they started to introduce new appellations, and Rasteau came next. And these are all little, and I have to understand, I mean, I could show you in the book, probably just wait for another show to do that rather than waste the time trying to get it out. But you have all these little villages, Côte de Rhone village, you may have seen all these little villages. And so what they were doing is they were taking some of the villages which they considered to be of higher quality than the others, and they applied for their own appellation status. So Rasteau came next, and then came Carène. It's possible Vaucluse has also received that in the meantime. I'm not aware. That would be very recent. But Carène is, I guess you could say it's number 4 in the appellation right now. So usually it's red, though. They have a white here. So you can see with the two of these. So this is mostly Grenache Blanc and has some Viognier and then a little bit of Marsanne-Roussanne, which we'll explore Marsanne-Roussanne more when we're in the Northern Rhone. This one is mostly Grenache and Viognier, a lot more Viognier. And you can tell because even though the bottles are different color, you can also see just from the glasses itself, and this is maybe not a really good light, but this is substantially more yellow than that one. And that's Viognier. Viognier is a very bright colored wine, and it's a very bright flavored wine. So we'll go in, try these real quick. Celine, it's great to see you on here. I would love to apply for monetization. I'm not sure if they're gonna do it or not. Given my own circumstances, probably not, but it's a good idea. So the nose here, it's really light and delicate, almost a little like chamomile. And I'm not super familiar with the distinct profile of Grenache Blanc, but the Marsanne-Roussanne I can definitely, well, it's reminiscent. I don't know if it's what's mainly showing here, but the Viognier is softer. On the palate, though, it jumps out more. Doesn't overpower it, but the Viognier is a very, very floral and not like a delicate floral. Like it's a little heavy-handed. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of Viognier. It's totally acceptable, good grape. It's just very, very big in flavor. Too little, too big. Let's go with the Carène. So there's more of the sort of grape and elevated stuff from the Viognier on here. But I think what we're getting the theme is the Grenache Blanc, which again I'm not super familiar with. I've had it before, but not enough that I have a recollection of how it's supposed to taste and how it's supposed to be different. So it seems like the Carême is more weight to it. It's weightier than the Côte d'Aron, and that's the Viognier, right? It's the Viognier. It seems like the Grenache Blanc, it is this more delicate chamomile flavored um, wine or varietal, and I quite like it, to be honest. The problem, of course, with Southern Rhone whites is that they're bigger in alcohol content, which I don't like. So we're looking at 14.5% alcohol content on a white. I don't really even a big fan of that on the red. So they're a little heavy in the body, but they're not aggressive with, the palate itself is pretty lovely. So the Carême is definitely superior though of the two. It's just got more going on, and the first one can almost feel a little. Yeah, I can almost feel like there's just more alcohol coming into it than flavor. So, you like the sweet lemonade type alcohol, Celine? Well, each to his or her own. It's you should definitely try. Um, well, you might like Asti. You might like Asti. It's generally pretty sweet and very grapey, and you can put some lemon juice in it, and no one's going to judge you for it. All right, let's go to the questions. Not too many, as I said. So I have a question for one of your future videos. Maybe it's stupid, but it's a real dilemma for me. Should ugly guys use Instagram or Facebook? I have never liked using it because I know that my appearance is not my strong suit, and I feel stupid trying to find angles where I look good. I also don't like faking. I try to look the best I can, but it only goes so far. Feels like it's not really something for me, but it seems that it's the main way people use to meet new people nowadays. So, this is a really good question. I appreciate that. I appreciate this. It's one I'm sure a lot of guys are out there thinking, but wouldn't have the courage to ask about it. So I don't believe that being less attractive is a huge reason not to use social media. Of course, I understand. Well, first off, when you say that you're not attractive, is it a fitness thing? Because if it's a fitness thing, you want to deal with that. That's controllable. It shouldn't be a reason not to put yourself out there. If it's something, with facial features and stuff that you feel insecure about, I'm going to base on that assumption. Okay, I'm based on that assumption. As a guy, it's a little bit different than as a girl. So what you're trying to produce from social media, obviously you want to look good, it helps, but the main thing you want to produce is that you're having cool experiences, you're connected with people, that you look confident, that you look exciting, that you don't have a boring life. That's the main value proposition. It's not so much about the looks. Now, obviously, the looks matter. I'm not saying that it'll be as successful for you as it would be with somebody who, was more attractive looking. But the purpose of social media is to keep people in contact with you, to keep leads in contact. And I just want to emphasize that you can really own this stuff. I mean, I know guys who are disabled and they've created really phenomenal social media profiles, and they get massive, massive followings because they're very inspirational in their own way. Now, I know you're not looking for that exact angle because you could argue that some of that is like, it's inspirational, but there's kind of like a pity element to it. So I'm not trying to take in that direction. I'm just trying to say that if you are doing cool things and you're acting cool as a guy, you really have a big advantage. It's harder for women with that stuff because guys are only interested in their social media really because they want to see if they're attractive. And I know that that's such like some misogynistic people don't want to hear that, but it's the truth. I mean, guys do not care very much about a woman's social media when they're dating, or when they're looking for girls on social media to date. What they care about is, do they look attractive? That's what they care about. Um, so I would do it. I think online dating would be a tougher sell. I don't think online dating would be the biggest ROI. But remember, you can meet people in person and you use social media to keep your social circle growing. And social circle and cold approach are by far the two best ways as a guy who's less attractive physically that you're going to get girls. But that's it. So I would say no to online dating. I know that wasn't in the question, but I would definitely build up the social media. And again, if this is some physical things that are in your control, really make that your focus, not because of social media exclusively, but because it's just important in general. It's going to make such a huge impact on your life. I can't even tell you. Celine, some comments here. A guy's appearance isn't the most important thing, in my opinion. To me, if a guy is competent and hardworking, that's what makes him attractive. I was never someone who could get by on their looks, and so from a young age, I had to develop the internal values so many people disregard, it seems. I mean, it's so true. And it's one of the things that they say, like, if you want to find a good girl, a lot of good girls are, the ugly ducklings when they were younger. It doesn't mean they're actually ugly, but that they just weren't the stunners, because they were the girls who really managed to develop a sense of self, and that was appealing. That was the kind of stuff that guys were really looking for. They had a deeper personality, and then later on, those girls blossomed and they became a real catch. But as for the opinion here on guys, that's true for most women. I'm not going to say that all women are like that. Some women really, women have their thing. Women have their thing. Some women really care more about, like, your financial job situation. Some women are going to care more about, are you funny? Are you making them laugh? Are you, super social? Other women are going to fixate a little bit more on how you look. That's just the way it is. But most women don't choose that latter category. It's a smaller subset. I would say probably 10 to 20% of women are driven by looks, whereas with men, it's like 90%. So it's really inverted there. So yeah, um, you know, you got a good situation as a guy, really. Even if you feel like you wish you had it better, you have a good situation. I have seen, comment here, I've seen ugly guys with decent looking women, but in other countries like Mexico. Well, it's an interesting comment, and I've seen that as well. But one of the big reasons is that the and I don't want to make too many assumptions. This may not have been what you observed, but when I've seen that to be the case in countries like Latin America, it's because the guys are wealthy and have a lot of machismo, right? So they're a little bit more aggressive. And this is something I've talked about quite a bit, but the Napoleon complex, right? The power of the Napoleon complex if you're a guy who's got poor pre-selection in the looks department. So you want to become successful and you want to be aggressive, right? But and that's going to get you an attractive woman. It's just you have to compensate for that category. If you're a more attractive guy, in fact, I've actually seen a lot of times some of the more attractive guys are more passive, because they didn't have to develop that stuff, and in some ways, it served them more poorly. So yeah, more patriarchal. That's a way to look at it. Celine, I was never a select or a head turner, so it was hard. And even though I developed a sense of self, I sometimes battled back in school, thinking because of how I looked, I didn't have as much worth. Yeah, and I'm really sorry to hear that. I mean, I know it's really tough out there for women, and I know it's a different if it's a different experience for girls. I don't think that guys can relate to. I mean, guys get bullied and pushed down the totem pole all the time, so they have their own traumatic social experience growing up. But it's definitely a sense of helplessness, I think, for a lot of women. And I give you a lot of credit for not getting resentful and letting it ruin things or poison the well, because a lot of women will get just really resentful and about it. So and not grow past it. So, all right, next question here. Hello there. I'm Catholic and I've fallen in love with a beautiful Persian girl born in Norway. She is Muslim but respects my faith. Is it possible to have a healthy marriage when we both belong to separate religions? I mostly think about children and how we will navigate that issue. Thank you for your presence on Twitter. It's a pleasure reading your emails, tweets. Well, you are welcome, most welcome, and I appreciate the kind words. As for the question, it is a very context question. But I will give you the fundamental, high probability answer, and that is under most circumstances, no, it doesn't usually work. But the real question here depends on how deep is the values difference. So you're a Catholic. Are you like a serious Catholic? Does it matter a lot to you? Does your faith matter a lot to you? She's a Muslim. Is she a serious Muslim? How much does her faith matter to her? If they both matter to you quite a bit, it's not impossible, but it could be problematic. If you're really devout, I think it's quite difficult to manage it. Now, at the same time, you might feel very accepted by the other person. And if you both are really accepting of each other and it's not something that's super, like, you're very happy to allow them to share their faith with the children and she's likewise happy, then you can manage it. You can work it out. I'm sure you could, but I'll tell you that it is quite difficult to do for people who take their faith seriously, because especially when it comes to children, because so much of building a family is about having that uniform, you know, your parents are on the same page. It creates stability in the family. And it's also just what a lot of the family traditions are built on. I haven't seen a lot of multi faith families make it in the long term, although you could argue that that wasn't necessarily because of the faith issue. The but I can say in those cases that it wasn't because of the faith issue. The faith wasn't super important. It was more on paper. So if you're secular and you just kind of have these categories, it probably doesn't matter. But if you're not secular, it probably does. I think you can do it if you want to try it. I certainly encourage you to go through the experience if you have strong feelings for her. But I would not compromise on what's really important to you, and um, see where it goes. See where it goes. At the end of the day, it would not surprise me if she shifted based on just the way you kind of phrase things. Just wouldn't surprise me. So, some of the comments here. Ben, I'm the male version of that. Grew up ugly, then fixed up my diet, fitness in high school, ended up a physically attractive guy with the mindset of an ugly one. Well, Ben, you're doing incredible stuff right now. I mean, I really can't even tell you how much I admire you. I know you've been moving from city to city, and it's been a real process of self discovery. But the fact is that you're doing it, and that mindset is gradually shifting. You're like, I don't have any doubts about where you're going. You're going to be crushing it internally as well as externally, and not a long period of time. So, and yeah, looks are only one variable of many in attraction. It's the threshold, right? You got to hit that threshold. Some other comments by Celine. When I was in middle school, I wore a back brace and I kind of got overlooked at all through school. So even after school for a few years, my confidence was low. It took a long time to get my self-esteem back up. Yeah, 100%. 100%. I can understand that. Oh man. Just thinking back to some of that stuff myself back in the day, and myself back in the day in high school growing up. It wasn't always easy. High school was pretty good, but middle school is rough for a lot of people, but I definitely had some rough years. Okay, Pat, maybe something to riff off of. How does the hero archetype integrate the savior? Is it the antidote to the savior complex pathology? Well, I'll address it a little bit of a different way, just by kind of using my own terminology here. So you have the triangle of the victim and the savior, and the oppressor, right? The villain. And the three of these are in like a lower density, a lower consciousness triangle. So the oppressor goes after the victim who looks to the savior to save him, and the savior goes after the aggressor, and it just cycles over and over again. Which is one of the reasons why being good, we talk about being good in the current era, how much of being good is about, do you just knee jerk go and fight evil? We're doing something a little bit different this time around, and we're bypassing the whole game. We're collapsing the game. We're not just knee jerk going to go and fight. We're going to point out, and we're going to no longer consent. It's a different thing. Okay. Just to give you an idea. So where do they all move to? So the victim goes into a position where the victim, they're not helpless. They have agency, and they can do things for themselves, right? And then you have the aggressor or the opposer, the villain, becomes a challenger, right? So it challenges the individual, and you start to look at that when someone goes against you, actually how it's a challenge for your own growth. You have an opportunity to improve. You have an opportunity to transcend as a result of that. So you don't look at them as this enemy who's down, keeping you down. You view them, and they view themselves as somebody who's designed to trigger you in a positive way. And then you have the savior. Well, the issue with the savior is that the savior, in a certain sense, violates free will. The savior goes after somebody else and tries to. It's almost, there's an element of validation seeking to what the savior does. The savior gets acknowledgement from saving other people, but also it takes on the emotional issues of the victim, right? When it does that stuff. And you see this kind of codependence in all sorts of relationships today. The savior complex is very inherent to good guys, or, guys. When I say good guys, I mean positively polarized and oriented men want to save other people because it gives them a sense of meaning. Um, but it's not actually serving the other party because it disempowers them, right? It disempowers the victim. It makes the other person into a victim, and it doesn't honor what the challenger might be offering. So the hero, you could say, or where the savior kind of moves more towards like a coach perspective, where they will help the other individual to help themselves, right? So rather than do all the work for them, it'll simply help to empower them. And so when you mentioned the hero archetype, the other aspect of the hero that's different from the savior is that the hero is acting for the sake of the hero is acting for the sake of good. It's not, with the savior, there is this look at me, acknowledge me. Whereas the hero is doing it simply because it is the right thing to do. So you could say the hero is aligned with a higher purpose, a higher self, right? It's not looking for the medal. So I would say that it's a way of, it is an integrated version of the savior, but there's many aspects of an integrated version of a savior. And I would actually say more adjacent than the hero is the, well, I guess it depends on the orientation. So if you're saving somebody, then a coach is a better representation than the savior. But if you're fighting against evil, then the hero is a better representation of it. So it kind of depends on what direction. What's the savior's relationship to the victim, then it shifts to a coach. If it's the savior's relationship to the oppressor, then it goes towards the hero. That makes sense. Um, but I would honestly, I think a really good way of looking at this, if you're interested in the archetypes, is to look at Joseph Campbell's work. He takes a lot of Jungian archetypes and goes deeper into them. And it is very also conceptual. I mean, the bottom line is as a man, whether you could consider this a hero or whatever, you want to stand up for what's right and don't consent to bad things happening, but you also need to allow other people. Don't overextend yourself for other people who are, help me, help me, help me. Like, if people are asking you to help them, see if you can empower them. I'm not talking about obvious, like, emergency situations where they're, trapped in a burning car and, empower yourself and figure out how to get your mangled body out of it. I'm not talking about those kind of situations, but in your regular day to day, a lot of people who need help, they don't they're asking you to save them, and your integration is getting them to save themselves, giving them the space to save themselves, giving them the guidance, saying you can do it, you got this, and if necessary, knowing when to pull back and leaving them on their own. That's a really difficult thing for a lot of men to do, is to allow people they care about to fail. But very often that space is exactly what they need. It's what they require. So let's look at some of these comments here. I've always been someone who has a strong faith in God, and the first guy I fell head over heels for was a believer like me, but I cared more about living by principles where he didn't. I never saw myself as a victim. I've always looked on the bright side, and it was my faith in God that got me through, honestly. God is great. God is great. Ben, middle school fucking sucked for me, but I loved high school. Finally got on my edge there. People started respecting me more once I put on a bit of muscle. Recently kicked my own savior complex, made a few dysfunctional friends in the last few years because of it, lost them whenever they had a real choice to self-empower and didn't take it. Yep, and that's part of the process, is dropping the individuals who won't evolve in the contracts with you. Remember the last video I talked about karmic relationships. Karmic relationships in a certain way are unraveling these kind of codependent strains within our intimate relationships. And a lot of these relationships don't last because the karmic strains on one party, they won't let go of it, but the other one will. And maybe the other one will as well after the relationship ends and they have that space and they can see the situation more clearly. But when but if both parties are able to move past the karma and move past it together, it's a beautiful thing. It's a really beautiful thing. It's kind of like fighting a war together and winning. It's like you really get to enjoy the peace knowing that you earned it. All right, so the last question here. I have been dating a guy for, this is a question from a woman, obviously. I've been dating a guy for a few months now, and we're in our mid-20s. He is sweet, and we want the same things. The issue is he invites me to everything he goes to, but won't fully acknowledge me when I show up. He will talk to his friends and literally turn his back to me. Why would he invite me to every outing he goes to if he's just going to do that? Part of me thinks he's just trying to show his friends that he can pull a cute girl. Is it possible he does not realize he is being rude? We do hang out by ourselves sometimes, but we are mostly with other people. I know you're going to say you need context, although I hope you gave enough context. You gave plenty of context. It's very, very good. I appreciate it. Okay. So it's actually really, I love this question. It's a really interesting question. So I think your assessment of it is pretty spot on. He's certainly showing you off, and he wants his friends to see you, but there's another layer to this. He wants you to chase him and validate him in those situations. So so he brings you out with his friends, you're a cute girl, and he then goes and is engaging with other people. It's kind of like a bit of showing off, and unfortunately it is sort of low consciousness behavior in the sense that you don't know people there, so you're feeling yourself pretty alienated, and your negative emotions, you feeling maybe less confident in the scenario, might make him feel more like a man. That's a not uncommon thing with guys who don't have themselves a super high self-esteem. I mean, you said you've been dating her for a few months, him for a few months. Uh, you hang out by yourself sometimes, but mostly with other people. This is what I would say to you. Despite what I just told you, I don't think that this means he's a bad person that you should just go dump him. It's just worth a conversation because he probably doesn't really understand what he's doing. He's probably a little bit he might get it on a certain level, but he's in denial about it fundamentally. So expect some gaslighting, like, oh, what are you talking about? I don't do that. You're just kind of being needy. But stick to your guns and just kind of just call it out what it is and say, look, we're mostly hanging out with your friends, but you don't. What are we? I mean, are you even? I think it's worth doing that stuff and then being willing to leave if he doesn't change. But you might very well start to see a breakthrough with it. It's certainly possible because he probably just doesn't understand how much it's affecting you, and he's so you could be flattered on a certain level, uh, in the sense that he is getting so much out of like he obviously wants you around. It's not like he doesn't really want to bring you to these things, but you kind of tag along. He wants you to come and then he ignores you. He cares about you. He cares about your opinion, how you feel. Just probably a little immature. Calling him out will make him self-conscious enough that it should start to turn things around. Keep me updated about it. I think it's a very interesting story. So just some of the questions in the chat here. We'll go through this stuff first. Then codependent dynamics I wasn't aware of. I got validation from being useful, the advice guy in their lives. They got validation from sharing their brokenness with me. Yeah, that's how it is. Now, David, good question here. What about escaping a controlling person? So I guess my sense from this is, how do you do it? How do you escape a controlling person? The hardest thing is actually realizing you're being controlled and realizing it, not like, oh, he doesn't give me what I want, but realizing you're being controlled by your need to be controlled, right? When we say, when we complain about someone that they're so controlling, we're still in the dynamic. We're still in it unconsciously. That what liberates us is not trying to get away from that controlling person, because then what tends to happen is we will find somebody else who will control us as well. So we go from that one controlling person to another. That's a very common thing that women, for instance, do. That they'll go from one abusive relationship to another abusive relationship. Now, there might be an intermediary where then there's a savior who comes in and takes her away, but then she'll leave the savior for somebody else who's going to control her again. This is one of the things that a lot of the red pill guys don't understand. It's like they simplify it with the alpha fucks beta bucks. A lot of it can simply just be brought down to low consciousness attachment patterns, where a girl will go from a guy who treats her badly to a guy who makes her feel better, but then she's not being treated as badly, controlled as much, so then she moves back to another guy who's going to control her. So you get out of that pattern by understanding how you're consenting to it, understanding that you are responsible, that you're seeking out abuse, you're seeking out somebody to control you. And that's difficult to do. And a lot of people just won't see it. Every now and then it happens less than it used to. I think my brand is fairly established in this kind of domain. Some people still, don't get it, but every now and then I'll get a guy who comes in and he's just not at the level of what we're talking about right now. He's just gotten out of something really rough, and he is really caught up in the game still. He's looking for someone to help him with the games. He's better suited to go for some of the people in the red pill community, some other people in those sort of, I call them a lower level red pill community, basics. He's just, because he's not really ready to be helped. He just wants to be able to like play the game. He's not ready to leave the game. He just wants to learn how to play the game, which is one of the reasons why guys who get abused, who are in abusive relationships, tend to either get into another abusive relationship or they end up becoming abusers. And so a lot of it's like, I'm going to take the power back. I'm going to learn how to withdraw attention from women on a basis to really make them anxious, and then when they feel that way, I have the advantage. A lot of guys, frankly, the prior question. I mean, a lot of this. Who knows if this guy read some of the red pill people, and so he's trying to withhold attention and look cool in front of his friends because that's going to make her more interested. Meanwhile, this girl is just trying to have a normal relationship and is getting really turned off by the whole thing because she's not as damaged and messed up as other women might be. So the point stands. It really comes down to you understanding how you've created your own prison, and that is definitely one of as above, so below kind of comment. It applies to the macro very much right now. How do you escape a controlling system? Be aware the system's controlling, and then gradually withdraw consent, both in your belief and emotionally, and then gradually your actions. You just gradually withdraw consent from being with that person or with that system. And when you do that, it loses power. If you react against it, it doesn't. It doesn't really. Doesn't to the same. If you try to then control it, you very well may become what you hate at the end of it all. And certainly you don't break the wheel. It'll start to reestablish itself later on. So anyway. It's oh man, just got the 21 Studios came in here. Pat is the goat. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I was about to sign out. If you guys have any one last questions here, you want to. Here's one from Celine. Do you think women can be simps like men? Yeah, I do think women can be simps like men. I won't say like men. I won't say like men because there's something particularly, I think, bad about when men do it. Maybe that's my own bias speaking, but because I do believe that both sexes should be, you know, autonomous and self-respecting, self-honoring. But a man simping after a woman is maybe more historically correct. You could argue that, but it's such a denial of their masculine purpose. It's really like trying to check out of the game. And I think it's a, it's you could say that the two things are symptoms of mommy issues in a man, and the other one is daddy issues in a girl, because it's usually girls with daddy issues who are going to do that kind of stuff because they're desperate to emotionally connect, sexually connect with um, the guy. So they will justify all sorts of behavior just to have him there. Um, so yeah, women can be simps, but there needs to be a different term for it. The thing is, it's sad when you see a girl doing that, but just to me, maybe it's just my personal opinion. When I see a guy doing that stuff, is revolting. It's revolting. It doesn't feel as sad to me when a woman does it, because I think it's more natural to have sympathy for women when they're going through heartbreaks and stuff. Whereas for men, there's just like, stop being stop being a bitch. Not to say you can't have empathy, but like really pull yourself together. You're totally humiliating yourself right now. So, and especially when they're like dumping their assets and stuff, just yeah, just terrible, terrible, terrible. So anyway, guys, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. It's supposed to be a short show. We're already at 40 minutes. So be back on Friday, most likely. and I will see you then. Send in questions via the DMs.